call to order. We don't have any electronic participation, so Pledge of Allegiance, Dr. Day.
Please rise for the pledge to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Day. And next one is agenda approval. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for work session?
I move
Motion.
We approve the agenda.
Mrs. Lowry?
Second.
Second, any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Mr. Gilio?
Yes.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Dr. Day?
Yes.
Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
Mrs. Preston?
Yes.
Mr. DePaul?
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie?
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next one is item F1, student recognition, spring 2024 follow-up. Dr. Edwards.
Okay, yes. So in the spring, we have our student recognition where we recognize all of our students that make it to regionals and states and finals and nationals and all the wonderful things. The beauty of that is our kids don't stop. They continue making it to states and nationals a long past when we had our board meeting. So what we started doing last year, we don't want to miss out on all of our athletes who are doing amazing things and their coaches. We want to celebrate them. So we take a little time at this August meeting to go over and recognize some of our teams and individual students along with their coaches. And I would love to say that this is short and sweet, but it's heritage in glass, so it's not. We have a lot of recognitions to do. And I'm going to ask Dr. Wodika to kind of help me with plaques and things as I call out the teams. So what I will do is call the entire team and also individual awards for individuals who made awards along with the coach. We're just going to ask you to come up, and Dr. Wodika has a nice team plaque for you, but we also have smaller individual plaques for each of the team members as well as the individual students. So we're going to start with EC Glass and girls tennis, which is coached by Diane Brown. And we have 3 separate awards in this. We have, and let me know if I say your name incorrectly, because you know I'm a big fan of names. Is it Tovia Carruthers? Is that correct? All right. Tovia Carruthers was state runner-up in tennis singles. Tovia, Mary Elizabeth Kennedy were state runner-up in doubles. And the entire girls tennis team from EC Glass were regional champions, Seminole District regular season champions. Let's give it up. Yeah, okay. And not to be outdone by girls tennis, we also have boys tennis team, which is coached by Leverne Marshall. And our boys tennis team tied for first place in the Seminole District regular season. So let's give it up for our boys team, Miss Marshall. Okay. Continuing still with EC Glass, moving on to baseball. We have 2 acknowledgments for baseball. One goes to an individual, Cooper Campbell, who is the District Pitcher of the Year, Region First Team Pitcher for EC Glass, representing us. Go, Cooper. And also the entire baseball team was Class 4 Region D tournament semifinalists. So congratulations to our baseball. And that is Coach Alan Jones. You had something to do with that. Okay. Still celebrating EC Glass, moving on to boys lacrosse. And again, 2 recognitions for boys lacrosse. The first goes to Robert Sorensen, who was the All-State Player of the Year and the Region Player of the Year. Congratulations to Robert. And also to the entire team, which was the Region Runner-Up Boys Lacrosse, coached by Eddie Reneska. still at EC Glass. Girls outdoor track, coached by Rodney Smith, with Julia Hall, Mary Hall, Heaven Harrington, Trinea Stewart, did I say that right, Trinea? And Sonia Gilbert. They were the region first place in the 4x100 relay and region first place in shot put and discus. So congratulations to Glass Outdoor. We'll see them in the Olympics. Okay. Moving on to number one, Big Orange Country, Heritage High School. We are going to start with girls outdoor track and field, and we have a couple of awards for girls outdoor track and field, coached by Donald Alexander, Sean Webb, Dwayne Morgan, Vincent Jones, Kenneth Sullins, and Ricky Calloway. So first, let me start with the individual awards, and then I'll do the team awards. So Austin Crawford placed 7th place in the 400 meter at States. Amari Davis, I think it's Tayana Morgan. Did I say that right? Tayana Morgan. Taylor Porter and Dezani Seward, 3rd place in the 4x100 meter relay. Ayana Hayden, 5th place in long jump, 8th place in 100 meter hurdles. Ayana Johnson, 5th place in 300 meter hurdles. Is it Ciasia Johnson? I'm looking at you, Miss Seisha Johnson, 7th place in the shot put. And Akira Millette, state champion in the high jump, triple jump, 100 hurdles, 2nd place in 300 hurdles, and 8th place in long jump. That's Miss Millette. Taylor Porter, 2nd place in the long jump. Makia Revel, 6th place in the shot put. And Brianna Toon, 3rd place long jump, 4th place high jump. Wow. All right, did I get all of that? And after all that, while they take their team picture, I just want to make sure we're not missing anybody for that team picture, because with all that greatness over there, you know they are the team state champions for Region 3C and Seminole District champions. Whew, okay. And they are no stranger to success because they have been here before. So, congratulations for repeat, three-peat. What are you on, 4-peat? I don't even know how many years in a row. 7.
7 out of the last 10.
7 out of the last 10. Just take a look back there at all that amazing greatness and those coaches. Wow. Okay, our last award for Heritage High School. Again, several individual awards. And a team award goes to our boys outdoor track and field. So I'm going to start with the individuals. We have Mr. Marquise White, who was at States and placed 2nd in the triple jump and 4th in the long jump. And then Marquise White, Jaquan Ferguson, Kamandre Fleshman, and Jermaine Jackson are our 5th place 4x100 relay competitors at States. Xavier White at States, 7th place in discus and 2nd place in discus at the region. And, got me on here, Kanaj McCarty is 8th place pole vault for Heritage High School. And the team, who is coached by these amazing coaches here, Donald Alexander, Sean Webb, Dwayne Morgan, Vincent Jones, Kenneth Sullins, and Ricky Calloway. Multiple team members have placed at States and region. And again, this is not their first rodeo either, having many individual awards at States and region. So congratulations to our team. Okay.
Done with the awards?
I'm done with my awards.
I think they need a round of applause from us. I'll give a standing ovation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Wodeka. Thank you, coaches, students, and everyone for joining us. It's always important for us to just take a moment to recognize the hard work of our students. And for our parents, who I was one of those parents with my 5, you are the ultimate chauffeur, feeder, and all the things, parents. Thank you, parents, too, for making sure your children get back and forth to practice, and the commitment that you show driving all over to celebrate your children. We appreciate you, too.
Thank you. Next one is F2, Perrymont Park Transfer to City of Lynchburg, Dr. Edwards.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Woodica to talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and good evening, everyone. This is an item that has been reviewed by the school board before, earlier in the calendar year, but was also reviewed more recently on August 13th, by the Finance and Facilities Committee. This is an item just for discussion and information tonight that will appear on your
A little closer.
It will appear on your agenda on September 3rd. This is a project that we were approached by the City Department of Parks and Recreation to take a look at the property at Perrymont Elementary School and determine if there was a possibility of reverting some of that property back to the city to develop as a park. So we took a look at that property, determined that there's quite a bit of property that we actually do spend a lot of time maintaining, that we aren't planning to use for anything as well. And so this item would come to you to consider reverting this property back to the city as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we change this from a discussion item to an action item.
Right. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second. So it's now an action item.
We have to vote on the motion.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm calling the vote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good.
Just for information.
It is,
Change it to an action.
Right. Will there be more information coming?
this will be the only information. There will be a resolution that's adopted next time, but it's just simply saying that it's reverting back. So if you're comfortable with that, we can certainly take that.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connors,
Yes.
Mr. Gilio,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
and Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
So now this is an action item. You need a motion to approve it. Or
I'll move we approve. I'm going to have a question, but I'll move that we approve it.
is there a second?
Second. Yeah.
Mr. Paul, yes. Discussion?
Okay, so I just want to clarify, does all of this property that's been outlined here, is all of this currently school property?
So there is the back half of that, about where you see the brown spot, there's a spot that is considered the city property. Essentially, the majority of it is school property, but that's spelled out in the actual resolution that I didn't have before you tonight, but it's very much similar to what's up there. Yeah.
Okay. And you, I think you indicated that at present, we have no plans or dreams of using any of this property for any school-related construction or enhancements?
That's right. So two things. So the topography of the site is pretty challenging for construction where for the property that we're giving up, which makes it a great parkland. What we do potentially have, and we're having an agreement on this, is you'll see in at least the concept plan, is to add a school bus sort of loop that's sort of a pullover instead of the school buses being on. That's not in the plan right now, but that certainly would be something that we would engage in the future. When we talked about the facility master plan, when we said, hey, if you ever wanted to expand Perrymont, we think it probably needs to be done on the other side of the building. So essentially where that parking lot is now, that would be sort of converted there. So where we have the park space, we don't think that needs to be a space that would be considered for future. We just wouldn't work out.
I thought the school loop was part of the plan, isn't it?
It is part of the plan. It's just not there's not a capital project for that right now. So it's just not part of the financial plan right now.
So it's not part of, when they make the park, the loop will not be built.
That's right. That'll be ultimately, it would be a city or a school CIP project.
And I think I understand why you wouldn't develop on there, because I've walked back there before and it's like.
There's quite a bit of
So,
wetland and that sort of thing.
Other discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Gilio,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next one is,
I have a procedural question then, because what about the resolution itself? Will we come back to that
it'll
next?
be on September 3rd
So
agenda.
we've approved the motion to forward this property to the parks, but we will pass the actual resolution next
I
time.
think that's probably best practice, but I'm glad that we have the direction of where we're going.
Okay.
Then the
Alright.
practice will be that we'll just.
I just wanted to
vote on the
clarify that.
resolution. Yes, sir.
All right,
You
thank
saw the agenda prep meeting, we had the
Right.
resolution. Next one is F3, measuring student academic progress. Dr. Edwards.
Absolutely. Every year in August, we come back to the board to kind of go over measures of academic progress, particularly around the SOL test scores, accreditation, and just when you start seeing things as level 1, level 2, what does that mean? So Mrs. Pugh and Dr. Brown will go over that just to give the board more of a working vocabulary and understanding of everything, and just also hit some highlights with regard to some of the success stories with remediation, and most importantly, some of the things that we're doing this year moving forward. So I will turn it over to Mrs. Pugh and Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and good afternoon, School Board. We are, as Dr. Edwards said, going to go over some of the key things that we're focusing on right now in terms of student academic progress and success. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to start with accreditation and accountability, and I'm going to walk you through some things about accreditation, and then Dr. Brown's going to finish up with some of the information about our SOL scores and things that we're going to do. So the revised standards that measure performance on school quality indicators you can see here. Those were revised in 2018-19, and prior to that, school quality was measured using an overall student achievement on state tests, and that was combined for English, math, history, and science. These newer school quality indicators for elementary and middle school you see here are really focused and pull things out to look at really specific items. So academic achievement in English, math, and science. So that's the overall academic achievement of our students, overall in a school, overall in a division, but we also then look at that broken down by subgroup. There's the achievement gap in English and math, and again, that is looking at the gaps between the subgroups. So where are we overall, but then where do we have those gaps that we need to work on within our subgroups? And then another thing that's considered for accreditation is chronic absenteeism. Next slide. The school quality indicators for high school are the same. You see the first three are the same for elementary and middle school, but they also have the addition of graduation completion, and completion, dropout rate, and then college, career, and civic readiness. College, career, and civic readiness is determined by the number of students receiving credit for advanced coursework, the number of CTE finishers also earning CTE credentials, and the number of students participating in work-based or service learning experiences, and hold on a second, divided by the number of students in the on-time graduation cohort. So it's a fairly complicated measure, but it is looking at a lot of things in terms of preparedness for college, for career, and then for civic readiness. The graduation completion, that cohort is comprised of expected on-time graduates and students carried over from previous cohorts. So certain points are assigned for different diplomas, GEDs, certificates, et cetera. Again, chronic absenteeism, I think we know what that is, but students absent 10% or more of the school year, regardless of whether the absences are excused or unexcused, are considered to be chronically absent. And then the dropout rate is calculated as any student whose latest status is dropout or unconfirmed, divided by the number of students in the on-time graduation cohort. So there's a little bit more at the high school level than at the elementary and middle school level. So As you see in the reports, and then Dr. Edwards said, there are different levels. So there's a level 1, level 2, and level 3. And again, we can look at the different indicators. As I mentioned, we have academic achievement. So there's a level 1, 2, or 3 for academic achievement in English, math, and science. There's also a level for the achievement gap in English and science, and then chronic absenteeism and the rest for high school. So this just shows us in kind of a chart how that is calculated. So in order to receive a level 1, performance needs to be at or above the state standard for the indicator, and for reading, that's 75%. For math and science, that's 70%. You can also achieve a level 1 by showing sufficient improvements toward the state standard from the previous year. If you'd been at a level 2 and you've made at least a 10% gain then in the passing rate, then you can qualify for a level 1. Level 2, again, is below the state standard for indicator, but you're approaching level 1, and again, it could be sufficient improvement on an indicator from the level 3. And in just a minute, I'm going to go over specifically what those are, but again, for reading, it's a 75, math and science, it's always a 70%. And then level 3 is that the performance indicator is below that state standard, so it would mean that you didn't have any, that your students in that particular area didn't pass at the rate of 70% for math and science and or 75% for reading. And if you have a performance indicator at a certain level 2 for more than 4 consecutive years, that automatically qualifies as a level 3, which is below standards. Each of these levels has something that's unique, and all schools must develop a multi-year plan to support continuous improvement on all of these indicators. Each year, we receive information from the Office of School Quality, and this year we had a new framework, and it is actually more than just the academic framework. So in the past, our schools had to just really report on what they were going to do or put a plan in place for what they were going to do to address academics. This year, not only at the school level, but at the division level, we had to address academics, professional learning, staffing, and school climate and culture. And the division had to turn in plans for all 4 of those areas, but the schools had to turn in plans based on where their levels were, so either a level 1, 2, or 3. Level 1, don't have to submit a plan, so some of our schools who received level 1 and were fully accredited at the elementary level did not have to turn in plans, but that doesn't mean that we don't require them to have a plan internally. And then most of our schools had to submit plans related to academics as well as staffing. A few of them, particularly at the high school level, also had to submit around school climate and culture, which includes that chronic absenteeism, graduation, dropout, so those types of things.
Would you like questions during the presentation or after?
Probably after, but if you guys didn't number your slides, I was like,
We did not, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We can do it either way, however you
I just
prefer.
had one small question. Do you divide them in cohorts of elementary, middle, or high school, or all students when you count these standards of 70?
It's per school. So in just a minute, I'm going to show you an example of an accreditation report so you can see what it looks like at the school level.
This is slide number 5.
Thank you. All right, next slide.
Out of 18.
So again, schools with school quality indicators at either level 1 or 2. So with all of their indicators, they either a level 1 or level 2, then they are fully accredited. If you are a school with 1 or more indicator that is at a level 3, then you are accredited with conditions. And then accreditation denied is schools that fail to adopt or fully implement the required action plans. We do not have any schools that have had accreditation denied. We do have, you'll see in just a minute, some schools that have accreditation with conditions. And we have schools that are fully accredited. We also have, and you'll see, there are certain, you can get a 3-year waiver, and that's if you've been at a level 1 for three consecutive years, then you have another waiver for the next 3 years. And it doesn't matter if you have a level 3, which would then get you accredited with conditions. In those 3 years that you're on the waiver, you are fully accredited. And we do have some schools that are in that scenario right now. All right, next slide. So this is an example of a 22-23 school accreditation detail report that all school administrators receive, and we receive these at the division level as well. So this school is accredited, as each school quality indicator is at a level 1 or a level 2. So if you can see that, again, those indicators are on the left-hand side. So we have achievement, academic achievement in English, and then underneath that is the achievement gap for English, academic achievement for math, gap for math, science, academic achievement, and then this would be a high school because it does include, actually this is an elementary school because it doesn't include the graduation rate and dropout in college career readiness. So you can see academic achievement, they received a level 1, all the way down to chronic absenteeism, which was a level 2. So if we, and I'm not going to ask you to go back, but if we looked at how you achieve a level 1, it is, you don't have anything below
70 or 70.
yeah, well, 70%, but you also don't have anything at a level 3, right? And you only have 1, you don't have 2 or more at level 2. So that's an example of that report. If you would go to the next. Again, this is a little bit deeper dive. So this is how schools' performance levels are determined for a specific achievement indicator. So I had asked Ms. Day to print you out. This is also on the board docs for the public if you're interested in this. But this goes into much more detail, and if you, again, I'm sorry that the pages are not numbered, but if you go to the second full page, on the bottom of this document, it really specifically talks about the school quality indicator and performance levels and how each school gets those. So I'm just going to look at the first one. So again, this is an elementary school. The top one is for 23-24 school year. And this, it's interesting because 23-24 you would think would have been last year, like the end of last year when we'd be coming into this year. Because when we look at spring 24 results for SOL, we're typically coming into the new year. This would have, 23-24 is actually last year, and the 24-25 is actually this year. So the accreditation is kind of a year ahead. But anyway, the top one is last year. And as you can see, the current year and again, this is for English achievement. So the current year, there were 54 students passing, 4.5 growth, total tests of 76. The pass rate was 82.89, and that is at a level 1 because that is over the 75%. So that's on the far side. The final performance level is a level 1 because in that current year, it was over that 75% for English. If we look at the bottom table, again, this is for English achievement. This is for a school this current year. If you look at the current year, the achievement is 64.03. That's not at the 75% level that's needed. The 69.68, to get a level 2, the cutoff is 66%. So they will take the highest of the past 3 years. And so because the current cumulative 3-year was 69 point, and I think that's again is 68, they are at a level 2 because that's just above the 66% cutoff for a level 2. Even though the current year is 64%, which would have made them a level 3, they do look at a 3-year cumulative. And so if the 3-year cumulative is higher, that's the level that they will assign. So this particular school in English achievement is at a level 2 based on that cumulative 3-year pass rate. All right, next slide. And again, this is an even more in-depth example of an English achievement gap report because when we're looking at achievement gap, we're looking at subgroups of students and where the gaps are among those subgroups, not only within a school, a grade level, a division, but we're also looking at that with how they compare to the state. So this is an example of that report. And again, if you reference the code, you can see how that's determined. But if we look at, this is English, if we look at the second area, which is black students, the current year was 58.02. That is not above in English or reading, the 75%. And the previous year isn't either, but the cumulative 3-year is at a 60 again, so that they're going to be a level 3 for that. They look at all of the factors on the levels on the left-hand side, and they then look at the information that is on this handout that Ms. Day gave you. So for English achievement gap, a level 1 school has no more than one reporting subgroup demonstrating a level 2 performance. So in order to get a level 1 in this whole area, they would have had to have no more than one reporting group at a level 2. And here, if I look at this, there's 1, 2, several level 2s. In order to get a level 2, it has to be 2 or more reporting groups demonstrating a level 2 performance, and no more than one group reporting a level 3 performance. So they look at all this information on that level side, and by using this criteria that's set by the Code of Virginia, then they determine if it is a level 1, 2, or 3. So in this particular example, based on their subgroup breakdown, they ended up at a level 2. I just want to call your attention because there are oftentimes questions about passing, recovery, and growth. So passing is just that. It's students that are passing the state assessments, including expedited retakes. And in just a minute, Dr. Brown is going to talk about retakes and how our remediation that we have in place has been had a positive impact on retakes. So students are allowed to retake a test, so the passing rate includes those students that passed the first time or on an expedited retake. Recovery is students that are passing state assessments after remediation recovery. And what that means is, let's say, for example, a 6th grade student passes their English course as a 6th grader, and that's indicated on their report card, but they don't pass the English SOL in 6th grade. In 7th grade, if that same student again passes their English course and their English SOL, then the student is counted in being in recovery. So that's the number of students that would have passed the course the previous year, not passed the state assessment, then in their next year they passed the course and the corresponding SOL, and so they're counted in this pass rate as under the recovery. And then growth is students that are failing the state assessment but have shown growth in the growth assessments in the fall and the winter. Our students take a different assessment, a shorter assessment in the fall and the winter, and if they're showing growth, then that's accounted for here. So to note, in accreditation, growth is counted. However, in our SOL scores that Dr. Brown is going to talk about, those are not calculated with growth because the federal calculations don't account for growth either. So you have some reports that have growth included, which would be on these accreditation reports. So if you were to look at numbers on this report as opposed to numbers from, let's say, VDOE Build-A-Table or the numbers that we're going to present, some of them may be different because growth is not included there. So that is just a little overview of how that is calculated, and the next slide will show you where we are.
So can I just say something about that? Because often people think we're misrepresenting scores when we show this and they go, but right here it says that. And that's a real key point in terms of the difference between the federal scores, which are straight pass rates. So if the cutoff is 400 points, what percentage of kids made it to that 400 level? And it's important for us to know 400 points on a third grade test. When I become a fourth grader, I have to get 400 points on the fourth grade test, right? They're not taking the same test over and over and over again. So even kids who look like, well, they're not moving, they're not growing. If I have a 400, a 402, a 403, every single year I am mastering the content at that grade level because I'm taking a different test each year. We like to liken this to a baseball game and being great coaches. So our federal scores are pretty much our wins and losses, if you want to look at it that way. And our growth is batting average. So in theory, if we can get our kids' batting averages up, so if we can get them from kids who are scoring a 302 to a 359 to a 402, as they improve, so does the division. So we have to take a multi-tiered approach, looking at the individual child and really trying to raise their scores, as well as holistically across the division to bring the entire division's performance up at each school. So it sort of trickles up in terms of the work that we do. So Dr. Brown will talk about some strategies that are more batting average strategies, all the way up to some of the things that we do that are, let's increase our wins and losses in terms of looking at overall picture. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. That was an amazing unplanned segue into my section, which works beautifully. So I'm just going to go over some of the spring 2024 SOL assessment results, and some of the things that we want to highlight, if you can go to the next slide, is what Dr. Edwards was saying. When students don't pass the test the first time, and it is a cutoff, so if students receive a score of 350 to 399, they didn't pass, but that makes them eligible to retake the test. Because a lot of times people will think, okay, well, if they fail, then everybody should be able to get a retake, but that's not necessarily true. They have to have it within a certain score range. But once we get those scores back, our teachers immediately start identifying where the students are struggling and looking at the data, seeing what strands and standards they didn't fully understand, and really having targeted intervention to help them improve that, as Dr. Edwards said, that batting average so they can get their scores up. We just wanted to highlight a couple of schools and areas where we saw a lot of growth and a lot of success with that remediation. One was Paul Monroe. Ms. Lowry's alma mater right there. But we wanted to show you some scores here from the spring SOL. And as you can see, we had 19 students that were retested across all those subject areas there, and we saw an average score of almost 30%. So 30 points. So those students improved their scores almost 30 points from that targeted remediation to help them get over and improve their scores. At EC Glass, similarly in Algebra 2, saw 12 students that we retested and saw improvement 21, almost 22 points in those scores. And so we can see a lot of success across the division with this targeted remediation and using those skills. Next slide. We wanted to show just the big picture of where we were as a division across all core content areas. And so I think the big picture is that we are improving. We are seeing improvements, and I think across the state, if you've watched the news, across the state we're seeing improvement in SOL scores, and we're seeing that students are learning at a higher level. Of course, we have work to do, and we're never done until we get to all students by name by need to 100% pass rate. And so we're going to continue to do that work. One area that we did see students not score as well as history across all of our grade levels. But in every other grade level, every other content level, we did see an improvement in our SOL scores, as you can see indicated on this chart. Did want to talk a little bit about comparisons. And so a lot of times it's really tempting to compare. If you go to the next slide, our division to localities that are neighboring us. And I think that's a good comparison, and of course we want to make sure that we are keeping up with our neighbors as well. But I think it's important to realize that in Lynchburg we do have certain challenges and certain needs that aren't met, and certain opportunities that aren't there for our students and our community that do impact our scores and do need to be taken into consideration. So one of the things that we like to do is look and see how other cities around similar size or cities that have similar challenges as we do, how are they faring with their SOL scores? And if you look at other smaller cities or medium-sized cities across the state, you can see that our scores are comparable to where they are, if not leading in some areas. These are just some comparisons last year versus this year for reading and writing, also in math. And if you want to go to the next slide, you can also see that our science and history scores are comparable to those other cities. But again, we still have work that we are committed to doing and do have plans in place and are taking action and have been taking action long before these scores were out and are confident in our plan. If you can go to the next slide. One of the things that we want to, no data here, just want to make mention that it's important to use the data that we get. And one of the things that we see that we want to always address is our achievement gaps. And we want to make sure that all students are learning at a high level and all students have the best educational opportunities afforded to them in the state of Virginia and in our nation. And so one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we're looking at the data and breaking it down to see where those gaps are. And there's several different ways that we analyze this with our principals. We look at secondary level through grade level, 6th, 7th, and 8th. We also are looking to see what the subgroup data is for our ethnicities and the different groups and how they're faring versus state division and our local tests, our local school divisions in reading, writing, math, science, history. We also look to compare male versus female, so not just ethnicity, but we're looking to see male versus female. Do we have any gaps or do we have any areas that we need to pay special attention to and provide intervention, support, resources, or training? We also have, at the high school level, keen interest in our graduation rate and making sure that not just listed here on the slide, but also our attendance as well and dropout rate to make sure that we have our eyes on that and there are no gaps there as well. Next slide is similarly just highlighting that these are our focus areas for our elementary achievement gaps as well, and that these are things that we'll be targeting and focusing on as we are progressing throughout the school year. And then our final slide is just highlighting that we already had some scheduled cohorts of schools coming to do presentations to the board, and just making sure that you are kept aware of the progress and listening and learning along with our principals of what is going to be happening and taking place here in our schools throughout this year. And so we're not waiting until the end of the year to present all the data, but we're getting in real time updates as to our academic progress throughout the school year. I'll kick it back over to Deputy Superintendent Pugh.
All right. Can you just go back 2 slides for me? There you go. So thank you, Dr. Brown. I also just wanted to reiterate that at the secondary level, Dr. Edwards did a lot of work. I focused with elementary this summer at our first summer leadership meeting in June, and Dr. Edwards really focused with the secondary level, and in particular, focusing on Black student achievement this year. And how we can look at these subgroups, but looking at school versus division versus state. So when our principals come in the next 2 months, they will have baseline data around these different things that we've talked about. So their pass rates for end of course, their pass rates for grades 6, 7, and 8 in those different subject areas. But in particular at the secondary level, we've asked them really to focus on that Black student achievement and the gaps there. So I did want to call attention to that. On the next slide, at the elementary level, when they come in September or October, that's what they'll be focusing on. So this is really what the principals are focusing their goals and their continuous school improvement plans around as well. So I will turn it back over to Dr. Edwards.
Yep. So board members anticipate a lot of homework before they get to the board meeting, because their time with you will be short and sweet, but more for engagement. So you will not have very long, detailed presentations. We'll try to front load as much data home on the weekends before, so you have time to look at that. A lot of it is going to be SOL data that you already have some access to, and I've shared some with you. The goal for really coming here is to talk about here's what we know, here's our focus, but more importantly, here's what we're doing. And we really believe that hearing from the principals is very, very important, because research says you have an excellent building leader who's an instructional leader, you can move the needle. I was joking with Dr. Day and Dr. Gupta yesterday when they were in my office. There are no children in this building. There are no kids that we teach here. So the magic actually happens in the school buildings. So we need to make sure that our instructional leaders are very well supported, and that when they're in the classrooms working with the classroom teachers, one, they're making sure that they have everything that they need, whether that's guaranteed curriculum, access to professional learning, professional development, the help from the D-certs, which are the coaches that come into the rooms to help them with their everything from behavioral coaches to literacy coaches to instructional coaches, academic coaching. So everything that a teacher would need in order to be successful, while also building relationships with families using community resources. And that's where we come in terms of providing support. So some of what you're going to see and hear will be both things that are coming home to you. You saw a little bit of that this weekend. But also when the building principals come here for opportunities to engage. Now, I will say there is no one-size-fits-all, because even as we looked at the data for Black student achievement, which for the secondary level, that's where we had our biggest gaps. If anybody's wondering, why did we focus there? When we looked at last year's data, that's where we saw the biggest disparities between scores. And it's also a place where we can improve in terms of that batting average and that growth that students can perform. So that is why we chose that, and I worked with them early June at the same time that we were at the University of Lynchburg, and we had a group of students who participated in a community / University of Lynchburg / Lynchburg City partnership for the Scholar Identity Program, which focuses on young Black males and their performance. And I'm told by Dr. Whiting he wants to expand that to include females as well, which will be great. So we had the males on campus with us, while we had the adults on campus as well, working on some strategies for that. Elementary, you guys approved our division literacy plan, which we submitted to the state, and that also has been approved. So a lot of their focus is going to be around literacy, because we're there, but we also see those scores in Black students as well. Now, I have to do a disclaimer. So sometimes when you point out something like, we're focusing on Black student achievement, there's just a period. There's not a comma or an and. That does not mean that we're not focusing on all students. We are still focusing on all students. We still want to get our advanced proficient rates up. That's something that we haven't talked about. And you might be a school that's accredited, that's passing, and we have raised that bar and said, we think you have more kids who can get to the advanced proficient level, or more kids who can participate in some of those advanced courses at the high school level. So we want to push them to raise the bar there. But just because we are being very focused and intentional to do some strategic things to really focus on Black student achievement does not mean that we are not focusing on achievement of all of our students. So I always feel like I have to put that disclaimer there as we laser in. But this is like working on your home. You know, you have a big home, multiple rooms, and special attention needs to go to the bathroom right now, or special attention needs to go to the bedroom, or the outdoors, wherever you want to put that special attention, but you're not neglecting your house, right? So that's what we are doing here, and it's one of the things that we have talked about. We are excited about our partnership with our community partners who are working with us, because part of what you see with the test scores is also factored into some of the things. I just looked back there at Beth, making sure that all of our kids are well fed, And she will give you all the research that you can handle on how important nutrition is for just basic needs and cognition, but also our mentors that work with our students who work on self-esteem, self-efficacy. I can do it, nothing, it may be a challenge now. How do I chunk this? And just all of the things that we have with our university partners and the partnership that we have. We have a meeting Friday with Liberty University to talk about some tutoring and some community service activities that we have with them. So we're using everything and everybody to raise the bar for all of our children because they're absolutely worth it for that. Okay.
Questions for Dr. Edwards? Dr. Day?
Yeah, I have a few. Could we go back to slide number 5? That was, it's
Right there.
now, okay, those percentages, whether it's 75 or 70, that refers to the number of students who took that test and passed it, reached the, 400 out of 600, compared to the total number of students who took the test. Is there ever any difference between the total number of students in a grade and the total number of students who took the test?
Yes.
Yes.
And so this is the percentage of students who actually took the test
Yes.
and passed, not those who were maybe eligible but for whatever reason didn't take it.
Yes. And here, again, remember, it includes not just those students who passed it, but it includes those students who, with recovery, so that was what I
Right.
talked about of, the 6th grade to 7th grade example, and then also with growth. So again, they factor in growth, so that's that passing rate. But yes, the number of tests, the number here could sometimes be different than the number of students in a particular grade.
Now, when you referred to the federal pass level, there's no growth component of that. It's
Correct.
just the raw SOL scores, right?
Correct.
But it's still the same SOL tests. There's not a
Yes.
separate federal battery of tests that is distinct from the state one.
It's the same test.
Okay.
They just don't include growth. And I wanted to call that out because when you look at accreditation and the accreditation reports, and I'll also make a note that if you go to the School Quality Profiles site, which is a VDOE website, that was updated last week on Tuesday, I believe, with the current assessment. So if you look at a school or if you look at the division and you click it's kind of at the top of the page, if you click assessment, that's the spring 24 SOL data. And it also has our enrollment data and those types of things. The first tab that you land on is the accreditation tab. That has not been updated yet. So if people are going to look at that information, that's not been updated by the state. So the current accreditation levels for our schools are in this presentation here. And if you want more information, I certainly have a more detailed breakdown for accreditation. At some point, the VDOE will update those and they will match, but right now I just wanted to let you know that
Okay,
those
that's
don't
good to
match.
know.
So if you were to look at accreditation, that includes growth, but at the SOL scores that we presented tonight and what is counted at the federal level, they do not include growth.
Okay. Another question. Do some students ever take the SOL for a grade that's different than the grade they're enrolled in? Like, does a 5th grader ever take the 4th grade SOL?
Not there, but at the high school level, you may take a different,
Because it's at end of course
End
at
of
the high school
course.
level, or not by grade? Okay. And then if I am looking at the VDOE website and looking at that build a table page, which has huge amounts of data accessible through that page, but is that all just end of school year data? They wouldn't show the earlier SOL tests that occur, say, in the fall?
no, because those are different assessments.
Okay.
So the fall and the winter assessments are growth assessments, and those are shorter adaptive tests.
Right.
And it really is meant to show where a student is currently at that point in time on different strands. And then So the teacher then can use that data to see where a student's specific deficit might be, or a group of students, excuse me, and they can tailor their instruction to that. Then they take the assessment in the winter, and that may show growth on those particular areas where they had some deficits. That's what's accounted for in the accreditation in terms of growth.
Okay.
So if a student showed growth from fall to winter.
But if I look up a pass rate on that build-a-table thing, I'm going to see the end of year SOL.
You're going to see the federal end-of-year pass rates
Right, okay.
with no growth.
All right. Thank you. You've answered my questions.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. DePaul?
Would you please go to page 9 of 18? Okay, these are actual numbers for us, I take it. So we're looking at the black population, comes out to a level 3 after consecutive 3 years of 50s and 60s, or the 60 as an average. We look at the next one, which is economically disadvantaged. If 70 is the minimum and we've had 3 years at 67, wouldn't that be a level 3?
The 3-year cumulative is over a 66, and so that's a level 2.
Okay, so where were those numbers identified for us?
They are, and I referred to this packet, and that's why I had Ms. Day print it for you. It's also attached with the presentation in board docs.
Okay, so
But
that's-
this is the state statute that walks you through accreditation.
It wasn't in this particular.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, I didn't see it in
No.
there.
I just didn't want to a lot of real estate in terms of presentation, and that's why I had her
Okay.
print this for you.
I was looking back at the numbers that
Yep.
were 70 and 75.
You're fine.
No, page 10. We have a third of our schools are accredited and 2/3 are not, or they're accredited with conditions. We made, and then we looked up where our scores were 50 to 60%. Some were improving, one went down 10%. You refer to it as a challenge. I don't really expect you to come up here and say, geez, we really suck. I don't expect that from you. But to say that this is a challenge when we only have half of our people, our students succeeding or passing, that's a little more than a challenge to me. It doesn't ring true to me that we're just saying, oh, it's okay, we're working on it. I know you're working on it. That's given. But when you say that it's a challenge, it's more than a challenge to have half of the student population not passing. Am I missing something?
I disagree. It's a challenge. Things that are challenging are hard, and things that need to be tackled and embraced. When I was the principal at Dunbar Middle School, we weren't accredited. That school wasn't accredited for 8 years before my team took over. And we didn't get accredited the first year. It took a year to get, the second year we did, and we saw huge gains. And then we sustained those gains over 3 years, and they were able to sustain it past then. I'm not trying to downplay the challenges that we have. There are challenges and there are needs that need to be met, and I'm just trying to be transparent with the board and present, here's the data, and here's what we are seeing. We are seeing some growth, and I do believe in celebrating growth when there is opportunity to celebrate and there are bright spots. I also think that when there are challenges, we need to state that there are challenges and that we're trying to overcome them, and we have a plan that we're actively working on, and that plan wasn't just developed when these scores came out.
Well, I'm probably challenging your use of the words challenge. So it's obviously semantics we're talking about. And I'm not saying that if they're not challenges, I'm saying that it's more than a challenge. This seems a little bit more serious than that. When we take a look at a drop in the past couple years versus when we were going through COVID and we had higher numbers during the COVID time, if we're looking at the issues of discipline, I didn't see anything up there regarding some of your programs that I actually appreciate, and I love the progress you're making with them. Those numbers aren't up there, maybe because of their age, but we for some reason don't have a factor in here for the discipline problem that we're facing and is now being revealed through the media and other places. We have an issue that hasn't been addressed, is being addressed, but it hasn't been addressed enough with these low scores, in my opinion, that we need. Again, I find it more serious than, while it is a challenge, it's more serious than we're having a challenge.
So we are working tirelessly behind the scenes and in front of the scenes to make sure that we're addressing these, because these are kids. These aren't just scores and numbers. It's not a contest for us. These are our students' lives, and this is work that has generational impact. And that's something that I believe in every single day. I know my team, and we wake up every single day and come to work to do this work because it's important, and we understand that our community depends on the work that we do and the seriousness in which we take it. And I would love the opportunity to meet with the board during a work session and have more time to spend to share all the plans and the intricate details of the work that we're doing. It is very difficult to present these numbers and be able to explain all the interventions and things that we're putting in place. But I agree with you. There's serious work that we're doing, and we're putting serious attention to detail and doing the serious, taking the serious action to make sure that we're improving it. We didn't spend time today on discipline numbers because it's not included in accreditation. That's based off state and federal. They look at attendance, they look at graduation rate, dropout rate, and SOL scores, test scores. We're happy to present those data. I think that if you're referencing the local, the recent media attention towards our discipline numbers, I think that was misrepresented as they represented numbers from the 2022-2023 school year. And that, when we are seeing the interventions that we're putting in place and the great work that we're doing for our team to curb behavior post-pandemic, we're proud of the work that we're doing. There's still work to do, and we'll continue to do that work. But we're standing here, standing tall, doing the work, and making sure that we take it seriously because it's important work.
I just want that recognized, that's all.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Other questions?
I'm not sure if everybody understands how much of your rollover, I know, but how much of your rollover factors into your test scores. For example, the fifth grader that you tested now is going to be in sixth grade. You'll have a new third grade, and fourth grade's been there. And you see what I'm saying? From your eighth grader who tested, but now is going to be ninth, and then your senior that we saw their scores, but now they're no longer there. Do you see what I'm saying? So how does that factor in? I think everybody needs to sort of hear that.
Sure. And I think you're talking perhaps about a graduation cohort, looking at those students.
Well, just as they move on. For example, I know at Palmer we had some years where it was a real struggle. And so, but as those kids graduate, and as the kids that came to us and then that were been with us longer versus even some maybe kids that came into our school maybe at fourth grade or fifth grade. But as they went on and these other kids that we've had continue, then they did better, but then you'd have another cohort come through that does, but
Right.
that you have that last grade leave and then you have a different set.
Sure. And I do, there are a lot of different ways to look at it, and the reality is that the scores are the scores, and there is work to do. And we certainly acknowledge that. I can share, and I'll share the information with Dr. Edwards, and she can certainly share that with you. I know over this previous weekend, she shared with you some of the improvements from last year to this year. I do have information all the way going back from 2014-15 all the way through to this year, so we can see that growth. And yes, there was a decline from 2018-19, and then in 19-20, we didn't take an assessment due to the pandemic. And then again in 2020 and 21, there was a decline, but since 21, all the way up, in most cases, we have seen steady growth, if not some small. But for instance, and this again is the division, but if we're looking at mathematics, the pass rate in 2021 was 36%. And again, the pass rate this year is 53%. I understand 53% is not where we want to be, but I agree with Dr. Brown. We do need to celebrate the fact that over the past 4 years, the work that we've been doing, the work that the teachers have been doing with the students, we are seeing some improvements and some results. So I can certainly share this information with you, Dr. Edwards, and if you'd like, they can have that. I think what Ms. Lowry is talking about is that you have different groups of students that come along, and one group may, in particular, if I'm in third grade this year and now I've moved on to fourth grade, that group of students may be a strong group of students and they've scored well. Now they're taking the fourth grade test, but then in third grade, I have another group of students that's coming up and they may not be as strong, they may have more gaps and deficits. So it looks like our scores went down, and they did, but you have a different group of students over time. So one of the ways that I like to look at it, and it's more difficult to do at the secondary level, but I've been tracking this now last year and this year, is looking at a graduation cohort. So last year it was the sixth graders. Last year it will be this year's current seventh graders. They will graduate in 2030. So I looked at their scores in reading and math as they were third graders, and then again as they were fourth graders, and then again as they were fifth graders. And in most cases, and I think this was shared with you all, in most cases there were improvements in many schools over those 3 years with that same group of students, and that's a huge success. I've begun to look at that data this year for the graduating cohort of 2031, which will be our current sixth graders, and we do have some instances where in certain schools those students, that same group of students, has progressed over time. Now, again, you may have a student or two move out, some new students come in, but for the bulk of the students that are taking that assessment, they are the same cohort within the school. So lots of different ways to look at the data.
Yeah, and I've shared with you all that data for the third, fourth, and fifth grade. The challenge when they are now sixth graders who just took the test, and I think the last one, I have that column blank because at the time that I had given you that we didn't have the final data, is trying to track back and align those student performances for the 3 middle schools back to the 11 elementary schools. So it becomes a little bit more tricky to say here who, what, and I will say we have an amazing resource in Chuck Yarbrough who works with us as our ed data specialist. And, he works very hard to try to do those types of correlations for us. He's a whole department of one person with all of us asking him for various data plus state reporting data, which thank you, Chuck, for doing that. But trying to isolate, like as we look at, let's just say Lincoln Middle School, sixth grade student scores for reading, can we isolate the students that came from Lincoln Elementary and then factor in all the different feeder schools? We do have over, I don't know, we must process, it feels like about 500 between babysitter hardship and superintendent placements and non-resident student placements, students who are not at their zone school. So sometimes when we're making those decisions about, well, this group goes here, so therefore, but we actually have to look at, are the kids in those houses actually going to that school? Because many go to a different school, and then we added, of course, SFI, Schools for Innovation, and the Go Center, and BASS, year-round school, so we've got kids everywhere. So trying to track that and seeing if that progress continues. So we've almost started again at 6, 7, and 8 now, looking at that cohort to see how they do in their individual middle schools when we get the data.
Thank you. Questions? All right. Thank you, Dr. Edwards.
Can I just add one little piece just about the thing that I sent this weekend? And I know I'm having quarterly meetings with a couple of you. But one of the things that we did do with raw data or federal data, just straight pass, the percentage of students who pass, is I sent you the combination, and you can do this from the Build a Table. There are 54 different combinations of subgroup and tests. So you could have Black students for math, females for science, all students for reading for the division level. So we just took all of our kiddos and put them together, 54 different measures of test scores, and we looked at last year and this year. From last year to this year, of the 54 measures, 40 of them show improvement. So 40 out of the 54, the percent of students from last year to this year, when you look at that percentage, has increased. There were 4 that were flat. They were the same percentage of students that passed both years. And then I think there were 12 or so or 10 that went down, that decreased in there. And I think that's important data for us to look at. And even as I met with some of our board members yesterday, if we just sit back and do what I call the flyover, because you really don't know till you get down into the data, But even the flyover, where you look at where are those 21% percentage point increases, a lot of that work is done at the writing level. When you look at our scores, the writing scores tended to go up. And then when I looked at, oh goodness, what are these 10 indicators that went down? Of the 10 indicators that went down, 8 of them were history. 8 of them were history, which tells us, all right, we've got some content alignment things that we need to go back and dig into and look at, because why are our history scores trending down? That's the kind of work that we do behind the scenes. We do it with building principals, we do it with the instructional team, and just go in and provide that support and resources. So as we do more of that, I will continue to share that with you all so that you have that information, so that we are all talking about academics.
Thank you, Dr.
My question,
Yeah, go ahead.
my question is, the 10 schools that are with conditions, how long have they been like that?
Some of them, this is the first year they are accredited with conditions. You know, and again, we have that information from year to year. But remember, to be accredited with conditions, you have to have one level 3. So you may have a school, and we have 1 or 2 at the elementary level that are all level 1s, except they have one level 3 indicator, and this year perhaps it's in science, and so they are accredited with conditions. But everywhere else, they're a level 1, and so their achievement is you know, they're doing very well.
That's good to know. All
And
right.
sometimes that's even like green, all academic, and then you have attendance that bumps you out for attendance, and that's something that's struggling with nationwide and especially here. So
The detail is important. I like that.
Detail and
because,
context
Yeah,
is
you don't
real
want to look
important.
at, just the superficial part of it.
yes, sir.
Which schools haven't fallen below that level 1 of the schools that are currently?
That have been fully accredited for a while. Paul Monroe has been fully accredited for a while. They are in what I spoke of as that 3-year waiver, even though they are still fully accredited. If you are fully accredited for 3 years, you get a 3-year waiver in accreditation, and doesn't matter what your scores are, you're still accredited. They, for the past, I don't know how many years, have been accredited based on their scores, not based on a waiver. Sheffield is,
I looked at this the other day, and for the previous, this year and the previous 2, the schools that were fully accredited all 3 years were Bedford Hills, T.C. Miller, Paul Monroe, Sandusky Elementary, Sheffield Elementary, Dunbar Middle School, and E.C. Glass High School.
Thank you.
yeah, and EC Glass is part of a 3-year waiver, so if you look at EC Glass, indicators, they do have a level 3. So that would make them accredited with conditions. But at some point, they were accredited for 3 years in a row. So now they are on their last year of being accredited based on that 3-year span. So, yeah, I think we have to, there's a difference between being accredited with conditions, fully accredited, and then accredited under a waiver. And I can certainly send you the information of which schools were fully accredited last year and which schools are fully accredited this year.
Great. I just want to see the right trend in context. On page 8, is that report for the same school?
I don't think so. Is that the
There's
split?
two- yeah,
The split report, the split report.
Oh, no, that's two
No,
different schools.
It's 2 different schools. Okay. On slide 12, is the Algebra 2 26, it says 2016 by it. Is that for some reason?
That's the test. It's the Algebra 2 end of course 2016 standards. That's the version of the test that was taken.
Okay. Slide 17 only lists a subgroup of goals to analyze this year, or what?
17, is that the closing the achievement gap secondary? Those are the things that we talked about. Dr. Edwards worked with the secondary principals at Summer Leadership in June, and really focusing on, as she said, not just focusing on Black student achievement, but all students, but in particular looking at this current year's data. where we saw the most need in terms of the achievement gap was with our Black students. So the middle school and the high school will be focusing on those specific things. So when principals come to you in the next 2 months and they're presenting baseline data, these are some of the indicators that and data sets that they're going to be talking about.
Okay,
That's what we've asked them to focus on this
soon.
year in their building goals in their school improvement plans.
All right. The slide that has the comparable divisions, to me, simply means Central Virginia is in trouble. When I saw those, that we are pretty well comparable to those similar sized cities with similar demographics, to me that just talks about not specifically Lynchburg, but the Central Virginia region. And being below a certain percentage of overall schools in Virginia it has a negative effect, I think, on perception in Lynchburg City Schools. So that definitely has to be worked on. That definitely has to be something that is, we need to break away. We need to break away from that. So I think as a goal, that would be something to focus on, is just maybe a theme or a motto, break away, so that we can be a leader in the area of Central Virginia, because that's what I'm seeing from that particular slide. And finally, building leadership needs the freedom from bureaucratic busyness in order to go to the schools, hallways, and classrooms so that they can improve this staff work that they see being done where it's needed. I think that if we can focus on the leaders and helping them to be free from so many things that they have to do, and so they can focus on the academics. From what I hear today, history is an emergency in Lynchburg City Schools. It's an emergency. We have to really nail this down big time, and we shouldn't have any excuses on it. We need to focus on it. I'm going to be bringing up the history of our country, September 17th. I think that all this progress is great in different parts, and I'm looking forward to seeing history come alive, especially in Lynchburg City Schools. I hope you agree. Thanks.
Thank you.
I would like to just add one piece for context for history as well. And so last year there was a programmatic change in which 7th and 8th grade both took civics, the civics SOL, which generally in Lynchburg only the 8th graders would take it. That was made so that there could be a step down in a progression so that we could have more rigorous opportunities for history classes. So we knew that we would take a drop, but felt like that was the best thing to do for students. So while it doesn't look that great on paper, students will have more rigorous opportunities, and we do feel we're on the right track, and that will rebound here soon. So I appreciate your attention, and we're right there with you. We're going to make sure it gets where it needs to be.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
We'll move on to item F4, pilot ID system, but school meal. Dr. Edwards.
Sure, this was one that you requested that we
And thank you, Ms. Pugh. I forgot.
Yes, thank you.
give you a little bit more detail on the pilot. So I have Dr. Woodica, Mrs. Morris, and Mr. Collins here to talk a little bit about that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Edwards, and good evening again. So one of the things that I've challenged the operations departments to do over the last couple of years is to think really intently about how we can improve student experiences when they're at school. So sometimes if we're doing different parts of the school division, if we're not doing direct teaching and learning, sometimes it can feel like, how is that really connected to student experiences? And one of the things that I've asked all the departments to do is to think really intently, and you've heard us talk about lots of things that we're doing to make this, again, the student experience better as much as we possibly can. So you've heard us talk a lot about improving HVACs and painting and making the buildings better. You've heard us talk about how we're changing some school bus schedules to try to make us more reliable, those sorts of things. One of the areas that we identified, and Mrs. Morris is going to talk briefly about this as well, is in the lunchroom, the wait times at the lunch in the lunch line have been too long. We've heard that from teachers, we've heard that from families, we've heard that from students. And I don't know if you're like me, but if you have to wait for lunch, you might get a little grouchy. And so we want to make sure that we are working to find ways to improve that student experience, move students through more quickly in the lunch line, and then innovate on that throughout the school division where we possibly can. So we identified this as a pilot project, worked with the principals to identify where we might be able to do this, as well as worked with families to make sure that we were communicating all the tools that we had as well. So we'll turn it over to Ms. Morris. She'll give you an overview of the program, and Mr. Collins will talk to us a little bit about some of the specific items that came up in terms of the way the technology works to make sure that we were addressing some of the concerns that may be there.
All right. Good evening, everyone. For those of you that I have not met, my name is Beth Morris, and I am the Director of School Nutrition for Lynchburg City Schools. And I'm happy to be here tonight to talk about an exciting pilot that I think will be very effective in creating a more positive lunch experience for our kids across the division. Eating nutritious school meals contributes to student success, and students need time to eat. We want students to spend the majority of their lunchtime eating a healthy meal and not standing in the lunch lines. So minutes matter in the cafeteria. As school nutrition is a federally funded program, we're required to account for all students that receive a school meal. In order to comply with the federal rule, we have 3 processes to identify students getting lunch currently. Student ID numbers are most widely used, where the student enters the 7-digit ID number in a pin pad. The challenge is that students have difficulty remembering that student ID number, especially our younger students, and this holds up the service lines. Secondly, we print student ID cards with barcodes for our younger students, kindergarten through 2nd grade, that can be scanned at the point of service. The challenge here is lost or missing cards, and that holds up the lunch service. When a student doesn't know their ID number or doesn't have an ID card, the cashier must look up the student by name. And unfortunately, some of our younger children in particular can't tell you what their name is other than what their mom or dad calls them, and that might be sweetheart. And that holds up the lunch line. Our current challenges chip away at the already precious meal minutes. In our aim to create more time to eat school lunch, we've focused on 3 objectives: speed, accountability, and accuracy. We launched a pilot with the student ID system, Identimetrics, at 3 of our elementary schools to address these objectives. We have these pilots at Bass, Bedford Hills, and Perrymont. With Identimetrics, next slide. With Identimetrics, it takes about 2 seconds to identify a student and record their meal. We anticipate similar increases in line speed to those realized at the Hawaii Department of Education, who's been an Identimetrics customer since 2016. Next slide. Using Identimetrics, we anticipate accomplishing both objectives related to accountability. First, complying with the requirement that we have a system in place to ensure that a student receives 1 reimbursable meal per day. And second, very importantly, making sure that we can identify students with food allergies to ensure that the meal they receive is safe for them to eat. Accuracy. Our current processes for identifying a student at lunch do not guarantee that we will identify the correct student. A student can enter an ID number that belongs to another student, or a student may use an ID card that belongs to another student. With Identimetrics, we know that the correct student is identified at the point of service and is accurately recorded as having received a reimbursable meal. The pilot has been paid for with school nutrition funds at a cost of $2,900 a school site. And this cost includes the hardware, the scanners, the software program, and the system installation, which has taken place. Enrollment in the program is optional, and families may opt out at any time. We have successfully enrolled the students at all 3 elementary schools this past week, with only 11 students out of 936 having opted out. Next, we will begin using the Identimetrics ID system at the 3 pilot schools tomorrow. Over the next several months, we'll evaluate the success of the pilot, measured by the lunch line speed and seated meal time for students. Based on measurable improvements, the Identimetrics ID system may be expanded to additional schools and additional uses within the division. As the pilot is just getting underway, we have not yet determined a timeline for possible expansion.
And I'm going to try to not bore you with some of the technical details of how this system works. In short, it can be broken down into 2 main phases. There's the registration phase and the implementation phase. And if you'll notice, A and B is the same in the registration phase and the implementation phase, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide. So the first step in the registration phase, a student just puts their finger on the scanner. Next slide. The scanner then reads in these little tiny points, several hundred of them, from the student's finger. These data points are then converted into this long string of numbers, ones and zeros, using a proprietary formula, mathematical formula that only works with Identimetrics. The data points that were collected are then immediately deleted from memory on the scanner, so they're not stored at all. That big string of ones and zeros are then converted into a template through asymmetric encryption, which I can go into more detail later if you have a question about that. But it looks like the big thing at the bottom. Next slide. The template that we created, that big string of letters and numbers, is then stored in a database here at LCS. It's not stored in the cloud. It's not on anyone else's servers. Only LCS employees have access. And that template is then associated with a student number, their first name, their last name, and the student's grade. When we actually get into implementation, where the students are using the program, the student scans their finger. Oops, go back. Yep, the student scans their finger, and that whole process of building the ones and zeros and building that encrypted template happens again. The template is then sent to the database server. There we go, next slide. The server software goes through, finds that template in the database, and then returns the associated student number to the school nutrition software. So in summary, we're not taking fingerprints. We're just scanning points on a finger. Those are converted into a bunch of numbers. Those numbers are then encrypted. The points that were collected are deleted. And we end up with a one-way encrypted thing that cannot be used to reproduce anything about the student. And then the student ID number is returned directly back to the school nutrition line so that the student can get their food.
So we'll take any questions. And again, I just kind of want to reiterate for not only the board, but also the public, is that there are no images of any kind of fingerprints that are being even taken or stored. There are no, if you think about like law enforcement fingerprints, you have multiple I actually haven't been fingerprinted by law enforcement, so perhaps you have, I don't know. But so it's a very different kind of thing that we're talking about. So wanted to kind of explain how that process works, just to kind of tell you some of the differences and just let you know what some of the motivations were for going on this project, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's successful and we'll continue forward. Happy to take any questions.
Main concern I've been hearing from parents is why not opt in, why opt out?
But the opt-out was used as we needed a large enough group to make sure that the pilot could actually be measured. And an opt-in is much more difficult to acquire agreement than the opt-out. And that way we built a large enough base to actually measure the success of the program.
What happens with those students who choose not to do it then? How do they get their lunches?
Well, it is such a small number of students, and we've worked individually at each one of those schools. Some of them will have an ID card, and others, our cashier actually has their names at the register, and we'll just simply look them up. Because it is such a small number of kids.
So there's absolutely no pressure at all. We want, again, this is all about making that student experience as good as we possibly can. And so we don't want that to be why is Little Reed not using them?
Mrs. Lowry here.
Okay, just because hackers are hackers, and Mr. Collins, I'm sure you know all about that. Their board needs something to do. Do you have like a wall of some type built in so it will catch hackers from even getting into your system and messing with it?
So we do have local firewalls on our servers that run. We also have a network perimeter firewall that protects our data center. In this case, even if, so worst case scenario, let's say someone got a hold of the thing that was used to generate the template. The only thing that they would ever get back is a student number that would only work, that would work in the school nutrition software.
Okay.
So the risk is extremely low, and they can't reproduce anything either. So I'll use an analogy here. It's kind of like KFC. Everybody loves Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? So if you eat a big old bucket of delicious chicken, and there's all those, you got chicken breasts and wings and legs and stuff, you're not going to be able to recreate the chicken. And even if I told you the process of cooking it and you kind of knew what the chicken was supposed to look like, you don't have the Colonel's secret recipe either. So there's multiple levels of protection.
Okay, and the other thing is, kids, especially young ones, they do all kinds of things with their fingers, or they're just dirty, or they've got a cut and a Band-Aid, so how are you gonna?
Well, actually, the most widely used form of student identification right now is a student putting their finger on 7 different digits on a pin pad. So we have that, we have that already, and we use alcohol wipes that are meant for technological pieces of equipment. And we also, with the enrolling of the students, we have them enroll both index fingers.
Okay.
And I did have several little boys.
Yes.
Little girl, I didn't have a single little girl. They were all little boys. They had, at least one of their fingers had a Band-Aid on it. And so we were able to say, well, if you have a Band-Aid on this finger, you'll still get lunch because you could use this finger.
Okay, because you talked about speed, so I'm like, well, if you got kid after kid after kid, I mean, it's like, you don't know what's
And
on
we
there.
do have, just like you all have the, which we became very accustomed to during COVID, the Lysol wipes, in a canister. We have them at the register, and we'll periodically throughout wipe off the scanner pad.
Cool.
That was actually my first concern.
Yep.
It wasn't the data security, it was what about the physical, the germs?
Yeah.
And I think it's Purdue University did a study, and biometric scanners have about the equivalent of a doorknob. So it's about the same amount of germs.
It's a fair point. We'll make sure that they're cleaned.
Well, it would be easier to give them a wipe before they even get there.
Yeah.
Everybody's finger's already clean.
They should do that anyway.
Yeah.
I just want to end with, I've been in school nutrition in this type of a role for over 20 years. And school nutrition is a partner in the educational day of our kids. It's not a pause in the educational day, it's a partner. But as I've experienced in my longevity is that we're always, if there is an area of conflict, it is with minutes. You're looking, principals are looking for instructional minutes, and I'm looking to preserve that lunch period. You've got the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics are recommending a minimum of 20 minutes of seated mealtime for our children. And when I'm having a principal that I have a great relationship with at the beginning of the school year coming to me and going, Beth, I'm really looking for some minutes. Can I shave off a few minutes at lunch? And I'm thinking, oh, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Our kids need that time. And I have wonderful relationships with our principals, and I understand both priorities. And so this, to me, was just such an exciting opportunity to say, you know what, we may not have to. We can both be on the same page. We can get the kids through the line more rapidly and give them more seated lunchtime without having to, for me to have to come to them and say, can I have a few more minutes of your instructional time?
Yeah. Well, feeding our students is very important for brain work especially, so, yeah. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
One
you.
more
Thank you.
question, if that's okay,
Oh, I'm sorry.
or two. How are the parents notified that this isn't fingerprint, but points that are being?
They did receive a letter to all of the parents of students in the pilot that was very layman's term identified what the system was and that it was definitely not fingerprinting.
All right. And then speaking to what she said, if a student has a Band-Aid on one finger and you can use the other finger, that means that more than one data point has been stored at some point. And how is that, you know?
So the system does allow multiple templates to be associated with a student record. So you could potentially do all 10 fingers if you wanted on a student. So that's how it works. With the registration process, they could do the first finger, it would store that. The second one, it would also store that in addition to the first one.
Okay, I knew it had to be stored somewhere because, you know, you can't just keep deleting it all the time. You won't find the student. So you're having up to 10 data points stored in the LCS network.
Well, it's up to 10, that big string of letters and numbers, it's up to 10 of those. And that is formed from hundreds of data points taken from the finger. So the scanner will identify, you've got all the little whorls and ridges and things on your finger. It'll identify literally hundreds of those.
I'm just saying,
per finger.
Yeah, if that doesn't work one day, then does the student have to go through some process to get the other finger? Do that?
No, they register both.
Both fingers are already
They're
registered.
both in, that's in
Thank
the
you, that's what I didn't hear.
registration
I didn't hear that.
process.
Okay,
Sorry.
both fingers are registered.
And as technology is, there's always going to be that day that that little boy's finger or that little girl's finger is not going to register, and we will very quickly look that child up, and they will go through the line and have their meal.
Do you foresee this as becoming like TSA's pre-check, where the students who have this pilot program get to be in the front of the line, and those who don't?
I think we would do it, if we're going to do it in a school, all the students in the school would be enrolled, and then we will have people come in and just, if you're an opt-out person, you're
Yeah.
not going to be at all even identified other than typing your number in or whatever you're doing. So, yeah, absolutely not. So,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
The next one, I think we'll do the two items. The councils are waiting upstairs, so we'll do item 1 and 2 because Ms. Bosher is waiting for her Special Education Advisory Committee approval and CTE. Is Mr. Dooley up there?
I don't think so, but.
Yeah. So we'll do the item G1, Dr. Edwards.
Okay, so real quick, Ms. Butcher, we had this item, but.
This is up for consent this evening. This is the SEAC committee membership. We actually held our first meeting last night. It was well-attended and a lot of very good ideas that came out of that. So this is just up for your final consent and approval, so that I can put that in the record and move on with the next
Is
meeting.
there a motion to approve? Mr. Andrews, is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Dowdy, any discussion?
So this is just approval of the membership list, correct? Now, I noticed that comparing the list of members here to those who filled out an application, only one of the 7 community members had indicated an interest in being on this committee actually made it onto the list. So what will happen to those 6 other people who expressed interest in this? Will they get some kind of invitation to come and participate, or?
Yeah, what we did last year, and we explained this previously, that she has to get her committee up and running before the kiddos, it's like start right away.
I understand the timing.
So when we get the new people who expressed interest, what she did last year was offer an invitation for them to be non-voting members to come to the meetings and attend. And I think we talked, and you said not many of them.
None of them showed up last year. We do call all the members and all the members that are on the list and invite them to each meeting. My secretary sat and did that last week, and we'll do that before each of them. None of the ones that I called, and I believe there were 10 last year, none of them ever showed up.
Okay, well, at least you extended the
But
invitation.
when we continue to extend the information on.
That's fine. That's what I wanted to.
Yes, we do.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Jalil.
Mr. Jalil, go ahead.
Do you have any attending any meetings that would benefit us or you for one of us to attend?
You all are always welcomed to any of the meetings. They're at Lincoln Elementary this year, and y'all are welcome to come at any time.
At lunchtime? I'm just kidding. I don't know.
No, not at.
All right.
Okay.
Any more questions? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Gilio,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews.
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Abstain.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
and Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. G2 CT Advisory Membership.
Yep, so similar to what Ms. Daniels-Bosher, or Dr. Daniels-Bosher just shared with CTE, Mr. Dooley also has his committee up and running rather quickly, particularly because of the nature of the work, and he also has specific areas that have to be filled. So both of them used the same procedure last year. When the board approved the new folks who were interested, they reached out and invited them to join them at any of their committees. And I don't think Dr. Daniels-Bosher said it, but one of the members who had reached out to be, I guess, a volunteer last year ended up on the committee this year. So I'll double check with her for that. But the same thing with Mr. Dooley, so you have his membership here, and he just needs approval.
Is there a membership cap on this committee?
Well, his membership is based on the sectors that have to, each of the pathways for CTE. So it's a little different than, and Dr. Daniels-Bosher's membership has to be parents of students in specific schools. The other two committees don't have those requirements quite that much. Or advisories, I should say.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve.
Second.
Dr. Day, any discussion?
Are we on CT or are we still on?
See, we are on CTE.
I just, is it a couple people I think need to be added? I'd like to.
Make a substitute motion now, since the motion.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that we add a couple community CTE members to this list.
What's your motion now?
You have particular people in mind?
Yes.
Go ahead. State your motion with the
My
name.
motion is that we add 2 other CTE experts in the community to this list.
And what are their names?
Randy Dunton and Gary Woodson.
She'd like to add Mr. Dunton and Mr. Woodson to this list. Is there a second for the substitute motion?
I'll second the motion.
Right, there's a second. Any discussion on the substitute motion?
I just have a question in terms of, and I don't know, because you have the list of people who applied, candidates who wanted to, if are these names on that?
Yeah, give me a second, I'll find that.
Sorry. And I don't know what the process was for vetting those candidates versus spots.
Let's see, I'm working on this. The only person who applied was Gary Woodson. And I think he was on this committee last year.
Yeah, because I'm on it too. So.
So the motion is on the floor. Any more discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call
I got it.
Mr. Andrews?
So there are 32 members on this list, but the committee membership rules say maximum of 20, so,
I was just asking, is there a cap?
okay,
Sorry.
okay.
So she said special education has, but this one doesn't. So,
Well, they have special education and CTE have specific requirements CTE has specific requirements for sectors that he has to fill. So I don't know that it's numbered at
Do
a.
you see a cap written?
Yeah, it's right here,
Yeah, it says
right on the
20.
front page.
Maximum.
Yeah, 20 was what we
Yeah.
said.
So that should appear here, right? You-
Oh, it says may
Yeah,
have
right
a
here.
maximum of 20.
May have a maximum of 20 members, so,
Including not- yeah.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it being larger, I just want to be sure we're careful.
so may have means it can be larger.
And this was submitted by Mr. Dooley, so I'm assuming these are folks who are already
Yeah.
working with him.
But the policy says may have a maximum.
Mr. Dunton is involved in.
I'm
or
just
work
saying,
for-
how are we justifying violating our policy?
But it's already has 32 members, what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah,
maximum
that's as
of
well
20.
over a maximum of 20.
May. may have a maximum of 3.
That's
It's
So it
pretty
can go
meaningless
over.
if it,
If we're
So
gonna,
it
yeah,
can go over.
doesn't say may only, but it,
if you're interpreting it as, it can have a maximum of 20, but it doesn't have to, which just seems to be the way you're trying to read this, I don't think, it's pointless to have that phrase in the policy statement at all if it doesn't mean must.
agreed.
It may only have 20 members, so, I mean, we could approve a waiver of the policy, I think that's within,
By approving it, you're approving a waiver in an indirect way anyway.
yeah, I'm not, as I said, I'm not opposed
Yeah.
to this membership list, I'm always uncomfortable if we're not actually following our own policies.
So Mr. Dooley would not meet his sectors if we limit him to 20. He wouldn't be able to meet them then, would he?
I can't say for sure which ones. If there may be duplicates on here, I would have to definitely check with him to see, but I know it's, like, just looking at the variety of folks on here and the walks that they come from, it looks very varied, so.
But the policy does not specify that there has to be someone from BWXT or there has to be someone from CVCC. It just says, including but not limited to parents, guardians, educators, retired professionals, and others. Each of the 14 program areas in CTE has an advisory committee which sends a representative. Now, have we gone beyond 14 program areas in CTE?
I would defer to probably the Perkins Grant, which is a grant for CTE that we receive money for, and it sometimes has stipulations about what you have to have in order
Right.
to accept those funds, so
Right.
it may be possible.
And it could be, we could do like Dr. Bosher was saying, you know, he could have the members if he needs to lessen and invite the others.
Yeah, that's right. That would be a way to meet the 20
Yeah, and
ceiling.
then just invite the others.
So I just expressed my procedural concern here. It's only a procedural concern.
Go ahead, call the roll, please, for substitute motion.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Abstained.
Dr. Day,
Now, this is a motion just to add 2 people to the list. We're not approving the list yet. I will vote yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
May I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
probably should have asked this question before. Is there a way for us to change the motion so that we can investigate what the actual requirements are and provide the names and occupations or whatever, business affiliation that they have, and then we vote on it once we know whether that's appropriate?
But let's vote on the
We
motion
Finish
to.
this vote, I can explain how we
Yeah,
can do
so
that.
let's add these 2 names and then we can investigate including these
Okay,
2.
well, then I will say no.
Mr. DePaul,
Abstain.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
I'm going to abstain as well.
What's the vote?
Motion carries.
Motion carries, all right.
So what we can do, and so now there is a motion on the floor that now has the originally listed names plus 2 new ones on it. That's the motion on the floor. We've amended the original motion. What we can do is defer the vote on it to a later date, to give us time to resolve questions we may have.
You are the maker of the original motion, do you want to withdraw your motion?
No, I'm not withdrawing the motion. I'm moving that we defer the vote on it.
So you're
to a
amending
later-
your own motion.
It's not an amendment of the motion. I'm not changing what the motion is. I'm just moving that we not vote on it tonight. We vote on it at a time in the future, which that's different than amending the motion.
So make a motion then.
I
Looking
move
forward.
that we defer the vote on this to our next board meeting.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
I was thinking that way it would give, that's why I said yes, it would give Mr. Dooley time to revamp his membership and make the others invitees.
All right, let's call the roll. You gotta go.
So now we're voting on my motion
Yeah,
to
defer,
defer the
yes,
vote.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Connor,
Abstain.
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Abstain.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes?
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So we move on, we're done with this item, right?
Yes.
So is there a motion to go into to change the agenda, or
Yeah.
how long will it take to do the other three? I think it'll take longer time.
Yeah, I
Motion.
I move that we move item J from our agenda up to now, because we have an attorney waiting to consult with us in closed session. So this is, my motion is a change to a previously approved agenda, so it takes a two-third vote to approve it. And you seconded the motion.
Right, let's call the roll.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Gilio,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews.
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
So item J1 now becomes the current item, so let me read. The school board chair recommends the school board approves a motion to convene a closed meeting to discuss the following as permitted by Virginia Code 2.2-3711A1, the discussion of assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salary, discipline, or resignation of the superintendent. Is there a motion to go into the closed session?
I so moved.
Motion. Second.
Second, okay.
Who made the motion?
He moved, I seconded.
Mr. DePaul and Dr. Day. Let's call the roll, madam.
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Gilio,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews.
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta.
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul.
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie.
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
So we'll go into upstairs for closed session, and we'll come back. in accordance with the Virginia Code of Virginia 2.2-3712D. But do we need to come out of the closed session first? So I move that we come out of the closed session, Madam. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The board chair recommends the school board approves the certification of closed meeting in accordance with the Virginia Code S 2.2-3712, parenthesis D. Is there a motion? I move that we certify the closed meeting. Is there a second? Mrs. Lowry. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We're back in open session.
Did you leave out?
The item where we left was the HR report, certified personnel data.
Okay, I'm going to turn that one over to Dr. Whitaker, since Mr. Shepherd is here.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. So you have the HR report for you as it stands, so would seek approval for that. And typically, we would not have this on a work session, but again, we're making sure we have positions.
Nominations and stuff.
Yes, ma'am, the nominations, separations, and retirements, and others.
And for our nominations, everybody's been vetted?
Everyone has passed the background check.
Okay. All right.
I will continue in the chair's absence. He'll be back in a moment. So this is an action item. Do we have a motion to, I guess we accept the report, is that right?
Yes.
So do we have a motion to accept the report?
Motion.
A second? Okay. Moved by Mrs. Lowry, seconded by Dr. Tinsley. Any discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor,
Just give me a second. Which item are we?
HR report.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
He's absent.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul,
Abstain.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Gupta is back. We're voting on whether to
HR.
accept the HR report. or
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next one is strategic plan, Dr. Edwards.
Yep, so you had asked that we give you an overview of the process we used for developing the last strategic plan, which would have been in 2019. So I've put on the board agenda in the public section just a short little history of what the board did and the timeline for what we did. There was some training that school board members, along with administrators, participated in at the Cambridge Strategic Planning Institute in Charlottesville. We spent 2 days of training there. We had a joint meeting to discuss proposed goals, as well as we had a community meeting at the first of many at Heritage High School to get community feedback on what those goals would be. So from the time from that community meeting, February 7th in 2019, the board had 10 school division plans that they looked at as references, and then we spent the next several months meeting with community members, small groups, subsections of different groups, as well as board work, where the board finally came up with the 4 goals that are listed there. The one thing that we did do, and right now Board Docs is not operating properly, is for every agenda item, once we approved our goals and moved forward, we linked the agenda items to the goals. So if you click on one of those goals, it'll take you back to historical agenda items that were linked to each of those 4 goals. And then over time, what we had been doing is reporting out on various parts of the strategic plan to the school board. So we had a section that was comprehensive strategic plan. We would pick one of the goals. I remember coming when we first did the pre-K, because we revised the pre-K program, and we've reported out on various things for the strategic plan as we've gone along.
I have a question. So were you referring to the document that was posted on the agenda?
Which-
Draft Strategic Planning Framework 24 through 29?
That's the strategic plan that you asked me to talk about the process, how we got here.
Yeah, so you were clicking on goals.
No, in board docs,
Oh,
If
okay.
you
Yeah, there
click
was goal
on-
1, goal 2, goal.
right, so when you click, what,
Okay.
one of the things the then school board wanted to do was, how does the strategic plan guide your work? So when we would talk about one of the objectives in a strategic plan and it would be on the agenda, we would link it so that we would have a historical record to go back and say, here are all the times we talked about goal 1, goal 2. And in some cases, we actually put the objective number like 3.2.7.
Yeah, so those 4 documents, goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, goal 4, they look like pictures of a whiteboard with lots of things handwritten in.
Yes, yes. That's on here too, yes. That was the board's retreat, and when they went in and did all of the board's priorities, and we had dots, and the board used, actually, we did that at University of Lynchburg, when Dr. Gupta was there. The school board members identified the priorities and came up with the 4 priorities, and then the 4 goals that you guys have, the overarching goals, were written by school board members.
So those were all from the previous development, the development of the current strategic plan. Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
Okay, other questions? Okay, next, your other
But
question?
then there's,
Okay,
then
this is
there's
the
the
new
other.
part. Okay, yeah, so that's the historical part, so I wanted to do that,
This.
just to see if anybody had any questions about that, because it was very, community involved. We had so many sub-community conversations, where, once we branched off into the 4 different groups, that's what we did. So just giving you that time frame from October till July for how we got to that. Then, as we were approaching the expiration of the original strategic plan, which would have expired in 2024, and we moved towards the Excellence by Design, and I can't remember what meeting that was, but Dr. Wodaka, whose title is now got strategic planning in it, gave the board a proposed process moving forward, but I think at that time, the board tabled it, and you weren't looking at that process. So that's part 2 on here. So you'll see draft strategic planning framework for 24-29, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Whitaker to just talk a little bit about when was that presented and what that was in reference to, just bringing back some things that we've showed you in the past.
Sure thing. So we wanted to provide just an idea of a framework. Certainly is not set in stone. That's up to you, but we just wanted to give you something to react to as we move forward. It was about this time last year, actually. We presented that and there's some timelines in it that would reflect last year. Essentially, this framework, as it's defined, is focused on a 5-phase process where we start to take a look at data. Well, first of all, we have a community group that comes together to help us to develop a strategic plan. There's some board members involved. There's some teachers involved. There's parents. There's students. Those sorts of things. Those sorts of people. We develop some really good data analysis. We do several report outs to the board. And then we focus in on several key issues that we hear from that data, as well as our conversations with the community. So kind of doing a really good mixed methods approach of getting information about where we are, and then focusing in on just several issues. So a lot of strategic plans will go and try to hit every single issue in a community, right? I think we would suggest that maybe focusing in on a few things would be a little easier to accomplish, not easier, but a little bit more focused as well. And then we craft the plan and adopt that plan for a period of years. So all this is a framework for how that might be done. Again, that's up to you. Just wanted to give you that to consider. And again, if you want to do something different, perfectly happy to do that with you as well. But just wanted to give that to you to consider.
Thank you. Good, thank you. We move to the Constitution Day. Mr. Jalil.
Yes. Board members, last year I made a motion to emphasize Constitution Day, September 17th. It's in the law that schools are to teach especially on the Constitution of the United States. Well, I came to the conclusion that I needed to ask for three things, and we discussed it a little bit last year. The first was to place Constitution Day on the school calendar. The second was to distribute thousands of booklets to our students. And third, I asked to create a montage from the photos and videos of classroom lessons and activities that were done that day. And they did so. So I'd like to show you the product of that particular endeavor, and because it passed 8-1. So this year, I would hope it would pass again. And we have a video keyed up. If we could play it.
Uh-oh.
Try again, it says.
Saved.
We the people of the United States.
In order to form a more perfect union,
Establish justice.
ensure domestic tranquility,
Provide for the common defense.
promote the general welfare
And secure the blessings of liberty.
to ourselves,
And our posterity.
do ordain and establish this Constitution
For the United States of America.
So we have that, yes. The students did a great job, and I'd like to do the same thing again this year. I would like to emphasize the preamble. If students could memorize the preamble, that would be a wonderful thing. And I'll be fundraising to promote certain things about that. I do have all the booklets that we need ahead of time this year. So now we'll just be forming the team to pack them and place them in the schools like we did last year. So I have a volunteer team. They'll just go and put bundled in 25s boxes of booklets in our schools. So I'd like to do that again this year. And the last point of this is if we could make it annual, so we don't have to bring it up for a vote every year. Same exact things except for the annual.
I'm sorry, what was the date again?
September 17th.
17th.
Yes.
So it's not in the calendar for this year.
I think it is. I thought I saw it.
I'm looking now.
I didn't think it
Oh,
was.
I saw it somewhere.
I see September.
I think if you go down, there's a list of maybe some holidays or,
Religious,
Maybe
cultural
that's where I saw
events.
and it may or may not be, I'm not sure.
Perhaps another reason to make it
Action,
annual,
what is-
so it can just be consistently placed on there.
So are you asking the board to take action tonight on this?
Yes, September 17th is coming quickly.
So the motion you want me to make is make this a perpetual calendar item. And what else?
That's it, just what I mentioned, nothing else.
Well, I'm asking you to repeat what you mentioned so we have it accurately. You're asking, to create a montage like this, is that something you're asking to happen every year?
Yes, sir. Just update the montage every year, place it on the calendar every year, and distribute booklets.
And booklet distribution each year.
Who's paying for those booklets? The LCS or,
They're already paid for.
no, for.
And perpetually.
For future. years.
Perpetually, 5 years from now, who's paying for them?
That's a good question. I don't think I'll
You'd have to probably make a budget item. I mean, like in a budget.
So maybe it should say, subject to funding.
Provision of the booklets subject to funding. Distribution of booklets subject to funding.
Chairman, can I ask a question?
Yes. Oh, hold on. Yeah, go ahead. You did.
Yeah, I just want to know why September 17th? What is that tied to?
The law.
Constitution Day.
Yeah.
Constitution Day? Okay.
law.
All right. Learn something new every day.
That's why we're doing it, right?
You'll be part of the month.
Yeah, I mean, it needs, I mean, we need, I'm all for the Constitution, I just didn't know.
It's on the calendar.
It's on the recognition.
So is it on the calendar that,
Yes, there is a, if you go on our website, there's a calendar, like just for the days and what days we're open and closed. But there is a recognition days calendar that we also publish that's available on our website. And it's on our recognition days, it says Constitution.
So I'll change this to recognition calendar.
Along with like National School Bus Driver Appreciation Days,
Yeah.
those types of things.
okay.
So I make a motion to do this perpetually.
So if I may state your motion for you, the motion is, one, that September 17th will be recognized on our Recognition Days calendar every year. Number two, every year, who is being asked to prepare this montage?
The same department that did it last year,
Which is what?
the Austin Journey Department. That's
Communications Department
Okay.
worked with the buildings.
Okay, so number two, Communications Department will work with the building principals to prepare a student montage each year in celebration of Constitution Day. And item number three is every year, the Constitution booklets will be distributed subject to funding to acquire them.
Yes.
3 points.
There are no objections, yes.
That's the motion. Motion with 3 points.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Jalil,
Yes.
Mr. Andrews,
Yes.
Dr. Day,
Yes?
Dr. Gupta,
Yes.
Mrs. Preston,
Yes.
Mr. DePaul.
Yes.
Mrs. Laurie,
Yes.
Dr. Tinsley.
Yes.
Motion carries.
We move to item H1, recent modified cell phone policy, JFCZ, Dr. Day.
Yeah, okay. So I'm sure you all remember that we did approve a changed version of our policy, JFCZ, about personal electronic communication devices. And that policy contained a definition of personal electronic communication devices, which says these are devices, that term is understood to mean any device that can send, receive, or play messages, audios, photos, or videos, or record audio or video, including smartwatches, earbuds, and headphones, but accepting any devices provided by LCS. This is currently what's in the policy JFCZ because it was formally adopted. Now, an issue has come up about this. The issue concerns whether this is intended to include wired headphones or wired earbuds, ones that must be physically plugged in. And I think our definition is ambiguous about that. It says including earbuds and headphones, but before that it talks about things that can record or play audio or visual. I think we need to clarify whether wired headphones are intended to fall under the restricted use that this policy describes. And the reason is that my understanding is that in some classrooms, there are legitimate uses for headphones plugged into the school-issued Chromebooks, all the elementary schools have a list of required items that students are expected to provide, and all of those lists include headphones. Now, the question is, there's also an issue about, is there a distinction between earbuds and headphones? And my personal opinion is that yes, there is. Earbuds can easily be concealed under hair, but headphones, which are, things that go over your head, over the ear headphones is the term that some schools use. I think we need to clarify what we intended to allow and what we intended to disallow. If we want the definition to include I'm sorry, I needed to think about this in advance a little bit better. Yeah, if we intended the prohibition, the definition of what the policy disallows, if we wanted it to disallow wired headphones and wired earbuds, we could modify the definition to include the phrase regardless of the mode of connectivity. So we could say including smartwatches, earbuds, and headphones regardless of the mode of connectivity. If we said that, it would make it clear that the definition included wired headphones and earbuds. But then we could allow in the paragraphs that talk about the prohibitions at elementary school, middle school, and high school, if we wanted, we could include language that says an exception is allowed for the use of privately owned wired over-the-ear headphones at the direction of the teacher as part of a lesson. We could write that exception in that gives explicit permission to use wired headphones when it's part of a teacher-directed lesson. On the other hand, if we want the definition not to be referring to wired headphones and earbuds, we could put the word wireless in the definition. Where the definition could refer to including smart watches, wired earbuds, and headphones. That way it would be clear that, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. We could put it, make the definition say wireless.
I think your first two options were great, and if we keep it that it's only at the direction of the teacher.
Yeah.
If we keep it that way, per their lessons, per the instructions, and use your first two examples, I think we got it covered.
Yeah. So here's a scenario I'm picturing. So if wired headphones are not disallowed in the hallway, then a student could plug wired headphones into their Chromebook and be walking down the hallway doing something on their Chromebook.
But that's not pursuant to a teacher's instruction.
Right. So that's why my preference would be to make the definition so that it does cover wired headphones, but allow an explicit allowance for them in teacher-directed classroom use.
Absolutely.
What do you think, Dr. Edwards?
Well, as I explained to Dr. J, just for the general public, what might be occurring, and Ms. Lowry, this might make sense to you too, if particularly young kids who are learning how to read, have the headphones on, listening to a read-aloud reading to them. You don't necessarily want that playing in the whole classroom if kids are working in small groups and in stations, and that has been the practice. We have several software that teachers use, particularly at the elementary level, to allow that to happen. When we first went full virtual with COVID, we were trying to buy the earbuds, and then of course mixing, matching, sanitary reasons, and of course having to replace them becomes expensive. Parents typically will buy something that their little one will like and use and zip it in their own Ziploc baggie, and it's personal, which is one of the reasons why we brought that to the attention. Maybe a little bit less at the secondary level, but I know, having been in music myself, like listening to my own musical creations and things like that, it would be better if I had my headset on or my headphones on, if I'm in a mixed classroom where other students are also creating music. So just brought that to the attention because we did not want to violate the policy.
Looking into future technology changes and evolves quickly, very quickly. I'm wondering if the language that you gave about as part of directed instruction in a classroom setting, regardless of whether they're wireless or wired, depending on the technology in use, as long as it's part of a lesson in a classroom directed by an instructor, that should be.
So you're saying that, that it shouldn't specifically say wired headphones, it might say any device that's approved by the teacher.
Yes, to be used in instruction.
In instructing directed activity.
Because technology advances, you know.
Yeah.
It may become where Bluetooth is just easier to manage for the teachers.
What I would suggest is that if that is what the board wants, I feel like I've been bumbling to explain this evening. I would like a chance to write a corrected version of the policy and bring it back to the board, so you're not relying on my bumbling effort to explain to
And
you.
let's work with Dr. Edwards and Ms. Pugh in drafting those words, so.
Yeah, I can make a draft, I can send it to both of you and to collect comment.
Yes.
And then it can come back to the board. Okay,
Don't make multiple changes,
thank you.
right? You good?
Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you. Next is informational items. Next school board meeting Tuesday, September 3rd, 5 p.m. Finance and Facilities Tuesday, September 10th, 3:30. Student Discipline Review Committee Thursday, September 12th. LACR Tuesday, September 17th, at 3:30. Next school board work session, September 17th at 5 p.m. Joint City Council School Board meeting, September 24th at Business Alliance, and I will be out of country. I'm just doing a disclaimer, so I won't be here for the Joint City Council School Board meeting. Academic Success Committee meeting, Wednesday, September 18th at 2024 at 3:30. Academic Success Committee meeting, no September meeting. Next will be October 22nd.
No, we changed that this afternoon.
It's
What-
12.
what-
We've added a meeting in September.
What's the date?
18th.
September 18th.
So next Academic Success Committee meeting is September 18th
Yeah.
at
That's
3:30
what
p.m.
number 7 says.
Eight needs to be going, I guess.
Yes, but would be no meeting in October. Yes,
Yeah, so it'll be September 18th at 3:30 p.m., right?
yes, I didn't see that one.
Good?
Yeah.
Thank you. We are adjourned.